Oi oi people, Silky here, and you're listening to the Lifer Musician Podcast. A podcast exploring the minds of creatives who've dedicated their lives to pursuing a career in music. The Lifer Musician Podcast is brought to you by Hookins Management, my artist services company that empowers our fellow DIY musicians to grow a monetised fan base without a record label. We offer a range of services such as online marketing, artist mentorship, release campaign management, videography, photography, graphic and website design, plus tons more useful services that are built to cater for independent musicians on small, self-funded budgets. Helping musicians market and monetize their art form is our passion. So if you're an artist that needs help taking your career to the next level, please feel free to reach out and get in touch via hookinsmanagement.com, where you can book a video call with me for some free advice on your project. On today's episode, I'm very honoured to be joined by one of the most exciting new ska bands on the planet, Catbite. They're a neo two-tone ska band from Philadelphia, and they're joining me today at the New Cross Inn venue in London as part of their debut headline tour of the UK. Signed to the thriving new independent US Ska label, Bad Time Records, the band has a DIY ethos and a living proof that you can live out your dreams as musicians and tour around the world without any big music industry backing. I'm sure our listener base of like-minded DIY musicians are going to find this conversation a hugely inspiring listen. So without further ado, let's get into it. So, Britt, Tim, Chris, Ben, sat here with all four members of Catbite. Welcome to the Lifer Musician Podcast. I'm a massive fan of your music and I'm absolutely buzzing to have you all on as guests, and I really do appreciate you taking time out of your busy touring schedule to come and chat with me today. So yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you. Hell yeah, we're here.
So you formed in 2018, which isn't that long ago. To be touring around the world already is very fast progress, especially considering there was no live music for a big chunk of that time during the pandemic. How does this all feel, touring places like the UK and Australia for the first time, and it happening within such a short space of time? Is it hard to fully process what's going on sometimes?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it feels pretty surreal because even in the States, like there was a lot of states that I've never even been to. So just like traveling to places that I've always wanted to go and never thought I would go is kind of crazy.
Yeah, and like the three of us have are the only ones that really have any touring experience. Like this is Britt's like first touring band.
Yeah.
And the three of us have been playing in ska bands for years, like 10, 15 years, which like the three of us, and like it's just wild that like now we're able to tour and people are showing up everywhere we go. And like there's scenes in Australia. There's this show tonight, our first ever UK show, is almost sold out. Like we just got off a West Coast tour with almost all of our shows were sold out, and it's like it's just wild. And like just seeing people in the crowd singing our songs like every single night, like hundreds of people. It's like it's wild. It's been cool.
I've been following it on the socials, and it looks like as well, like the Bad Time shows are all quite a young audience as well. It's like lots of like new people being introduced to the scene through the Bad Time bands.
Yeah,
that must be a buzz for you guys.
Yeah, just like because like it's just like coming out of the pandemic. Like once we started doing shows again, it's like everything kind of flipped a switch. Like before COVID, we had only played a handful of shows. We were still a baby band like before 2020. 2020 was going to be our year of touring, and then everything got canceled. And then coming out of the pandemic, we released our record, and our first show back was our record release show, and it sold out. 175 tickets. It sold out in 4 hours.
Wow.
And we're like,
was that in Philly?
It was in Philadelphia. It was our first ever headline show that we've ever done in our career.
Amazing.
And we announced the show about a week after we announced the record, and it sold out in 4 hours. And that was when we knew like this is something's going on. And then it just hasn't stopped. Like every show we do all over the world, it's just been it's been unlike anything we've ever seen before.
Amazing. And you mentioned as well that like you were grinding away in bands for years prior to this, playing to like empty rooms and stuff. So it must be like you know, it must make it all the more sweet that, like, you know, I can relate myself, because I've had a very similar journey, I think, by the sounds. I spent my teens and my entire 20s just playing to empty rooms, you know what I mean? I had record deals that didn't work out, and you know, all the rest of it, playing to empty tents at festivals and all the rest of it, like classic sort of like Neelyman shit. And then since Deaf Guitar Pop's formed, it's just snowballed, you know. It's the power of the ska, right?
It's wild. It's wild.
So, I mean, you touched on it a bit, but, you know, between first getting together to jam as musicians and now, was there a breakthrough moment somewhere along the line which made you realise there was something special about this band and the way that it was connecting with people?
I mean, I think putting out our second record and the response to it definitely was like, okay, I think we're doing something right, because that was particularly challenging in that we weren't supposed to have written that record, and we had tickets to Los Angeles to eventually go to Japan. When that shut down, we decided, okay, well, we'll still have these flights, let's go make a record. And then we had to write a record in like 3 months. And then without ever having like perform those in front of people, you really have to trust your gut. And it was a really kind of trying time where I think all individually and collectively kind of had a moment where like, hey, did we do the right thing? Did we make the right decision by putting out a record and attempting to make music in a time where like nobody's doing anything? And once we did put the record out and then saw how enthused people were about it, and then coupling that with starting to play shows again and seeing how enthused people were to be at shows again, I think that was one of the first moments where like, okay, I think we made the right choice. Now let's hit the road.
Yeah. We had a similar moment ourselves. We hadn't planned to write and record our third album when we did, but yeah, there was no shows for like 2 years, and I think we were about 4 months into the pandemic, and I was just on the phone to Johnny. He was like, "Should we make a record?" Like, people were asking for it, and we crowdfunded our third album, and we were, again, that was a bit like, should we be asking for money like during this time? But people were asking, and it felt right. And I think that although that was a real shit time for all of us, and especially in the music business, like no live music for 2 years, like it's fucking nothing worse in our industry. It was terrible. But some positives to come out of that was more people were about and on social media. So for new bands like yourselves and us, it was a good opportunity to release music and connect with people online. I mean, we did online concerts and things like that. Did you guys do any of that? Yeah.
That was like one of the things that saved, like, really, because we had all this momentum and no shows. And like, if we would have just given up and just like kind of just rode out the pandemic and then tried to start back up when shows started again, we would not have lasted. Because like, we had all this momentum and like we were just starting to get some attention. So like, right off the bat, like, me and Britt, just, it helped that like we're married and we lived together. So like, when everyone was in lockdown, we just started covering songs of like, just doing ska versions of like every band we know. Every single day we would just put out a new acoustic ska cover of like, you know, our friends or bands that we liked. And then after that, we started doing like, you know, quarantine style videos where like I would record scratch guitar and vocals to a click, and then we send it like to Chris. Chris would play drums and video, and then he'd send it to Ben. Ben would record bass, and then I have like Ben. It helps that Ben is an audio engineer, and then I do video. So we were just like constantly just cranking shit out like all day, every day. That's like that's what we spent the whole pandemic doing, like doing covers, doing weird shit, just anything to stay relevant. It kept us tight as a band. And then like, you know, then once we were able to see each other, then we would just we would just be our bubble. It was just the four of us and our partners and stuff. We would just hang out all the time and jam and just like get drunk and like make stupid videos, and like that's like, you know, that's what really kept us going and like kept us motivated and also kept us relevant online, because everyone was really starting to pay attention.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I first discovered you guys, it was in 2020, I think. So when all that was going on, like, that's when you came sort of like onto our radar. And I think that, you're right in that, like a lot of musicians understandably were just like, right, let's just shut up shop until this shit blows over and pick things back up. But but the bands that didn't and you know were stubborn and kept the momentum going online and did all those things that you just spoke about, ended up sort of ahead of the pack. Do you know what I mean? When we come out of it,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, I think we were definitely one of the few bands that I think used the pandemic to our benefit.
yeah,
You know, and like I completely get, like, you know, certain bands, especially if you have a lot of members or you might not be that familiar with social media, like I get why you might go on hiatus and just kind of pause everything for a while, but
yeah.
at the end of the day there was only 4 of us really, and we had the means to just continue to put stuff out, so we really
Yeah.
just kept the ball rolling, and we're like, well, if we can do it, why wouldn't we? And
Yeah.
we made it work for us, which is
That's brilliant, and I would say as well that like making a record during that period, I'm so grateful that I was able to do that because it kept me sane. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like all that isolating and shit. You know what I mean? That wasn't good for anyone's mental health. So to have the distraction of you know a project, a whole album, yeah, just as a creator and as an individual, that was really important to me. So,
Yeah,
for sure.
I totally agree.
yeah. Cool. So you're signed to a brilliant up-and-coming ska label, Bad Time Records. How did that come about, and how integral was the label's involvement been in getting your music out to the world?
So I know Mike from years before Catbite, playing my old band, playing with his band Kill Lincoln. They're based in DC, we're based in Philly, so it was right next door to each other. So we'd always play shows together, even though my old band was more of a trad. Me and Ben were in a band called The Snails, and it was like a trad ska band, and they were like the ska punk, pop punk stuff, but we still like kind of ran in the same circles because the ska scene
That's
was
kind
so
of that's just how small the scene was back then. That
Yeah.
like even across like Baltimore, DC, Philly, and New York, there were only like 4 or 5 ska bands that could all
Really?
play together.
Yeah.
So we all wound up kind of running that little circuit, going down south to Florida for stuff, but mostly staying on the East Coast and just like getting to know everyone up and down the coast as well.
Yeah, and basically like me and Britt started like, well, we started just doing a duo thing at first when Catbite started, just like putting stuff on Facebook, and he like saw that we were doing it, and then we recorded like 3 demo type things, 2 covers and an original. Just put out a video, put it on Facebook. No real intentions other than that we just wanted to play some ska music. And then it just so happened he was starting Bad Time Records the exact same time, and he hit me up on a Facebook message one day. He's like, hey, I'm starting a label. I'm kind of basing it off of the Asian Man Records like module, just like bands first, community first, DIY, just ska fun label. And we're like, yeah, we were literally like kind of just like me, Britt, and Chris, and our original bass player. We're just kind of like sitting around, just like not really sure what we wanted to do with the band. It was just kind of a fun project, and we had a show. We booked our first show before we had anything written. The band was formed, anything. We're just like, all right, let's do this. And then it just so worked out that like he's like, hey, do you want to do an EP? And we're like, yeah. And he's like, actually, do you want to do a whole record? And we're like, yeah. And we had no, nothing. We just wanted to do it, and no intention of it like getting this far. We didn't, because especially with like what we know with the ska scene and like what it's been for years, it's just like, we weren't expecting it to go anywhere. I'm like, but yeah, if he's gonna pay for it, sure, might as well.
I mean, it feels like to me like it's like that, the ska scene that you've been involved with for all these years is coming of age. Do you know what I mean? And Mike's starting the label, and you guys forming Catbite, and shedding the skins of like old bands and that, and it's all really starting to. That's what it feels like to me as a fan.
Yeah, it's because like there's a couple of like ska and ska adjacent record labels that have been around for a while in the US, like Jump Up Records and Version City, Stubborn Records, stuff like that. But they're all a little bit like outdated and not really connecting the scene. They have like their little niche pockets, and they just kind of put out records, and a couple people buy them, and that's just kind of how it's always been. And that's what it was like for our old label, like our old band. Just you do it. But this one, like Bad Time, was kind of just like this brand new, fresh community, and it was kind of just tying all that into like a brand new, fresh, young label with like social media like presence and like proper marketing, and it just it was that refreshing thing to the scene that kind of jump started the whole thing. And I feel like that's what like it just really tied the community together and made the community one and just grow, and it just became a like everyone just started hyping each other up, and it just
You're all like feeding off one another
Yeah.
and encouraging like your fellow bands. It's
exactly.
Greetings, listeners. Jake from Decent Mastering here. Really pleased to be involved with a podcast whose ethos aligns with my own, helping independent artists. My Pay What You Feel mastering service offers inclusivity to music creators with tighter budgets, giving quality audio at a price that suits them. To get in contact, send an email to decentmastering@gmail.com or send me a DM on Instagram @decentmastering. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Awesome. So now I can vouch for the fact that being in a DIY band in 2023 involves a shit ton of work that isn't actually performing, writing or recording music. It's social media management, accounts, tour logistics, merchandise, online store management, booking, marketing and everything else in between. How do you manage the workload on top of demanding touring schedules and your other jobs?
It's a lot of learning. I mean, I guess like going back to like we learned a lot of what not to do in our other years of touring. We learned a lot of what doesn't work, and then but also like during COVID, like we learned a lot of what works online and like social media and stuff like that, and just using social media to your advantage and like networking and collaborating with other bands and stuff. That's but then like as far as like touring and stuff, it's like I've done a lot, like we've also done a lot of crappy tours, and like we kind of learned to like avoid doing that type of shit. Like
you can
where
burn yourself out, can't you, playing too many of the wrong shows?
You don't tour to tour, you tour because there's a demand. So like I learned like I'm the manager of the band, and I've always kind of had a natural sense for marketing and like business sense, and I've just kind of learned like a lot of supply and demand and how that applies to being in a band. And like you can't just tour, you don't just book a tour through South Carolina and Georgia because there's big cities and it's a place to play. You play where you're wanted.
Yes.
And you need to create the demand before you hit the road. And there's no point in going on a 30-day tour when you're playing to 20 people a night and not making any money, and you're just burning yourself out. You're destroying your body. And it's just it's just years of learning, and now Catbite was just like a very fresh start. Like when I in my mind, like starting this band, I'm like, okay, everything has to be extremely strategic. Nothing can just be like, I mean, starting the band wasn't, but as soon as we started and we're like, oh shit, momentum. It's like, okay, we have to do this right. Our first recordings have to be very good. We can't just like do our own recordings and just like throw them on a Bandcamp site and pay what you want and like not have a proper release. Like we have to have cool videos. We have to like have like a release date. You have to like hype yourself up. Like you fake it till you make it. That's all you're doing, and like and that's what's really helped with this band.
Awesome.
And I mean, and like the merch stuff and all the business stuff is crazy because I never thought you could actually make money and like fund your own tours.
It's incredible, isn't it? Yeah.
So
I mean,
it's all learning.
Yeah, it's where I was at in my previous band just before Deaf Guitar Pop formed. We had a record deal and none of that shit worked out. We got shelved, and then we managed to get out of our contracts and release the album independently. Tried to like emulate what a big label would traditionally do and hire like a radio plugger and a national press like agency and that. It cost fucking thousands, and we got stuff
we tried that with our old band as well. We hired like PR people, and then even with that backing, it was just the scene like wasn't ready for that kind of stuff
absolutely yet. And we got like evening plays on Radio 1 and Radio X, the big stations over here, but I could see like, yeah, but it doesn't really convert like to actual audience. Do you know what I mean? Like you've got to pray that your target audience are in the car listening to Radio 1 at 7 o'clock on that particular Tuesday.
Exactly.
And then they got to fucking Shazam you and catch your band name and everything. So I was completely like, I can't see how you can make like a sustainable living out of this. And then when I started Deaf Guitar Pop, I discovered things like the Facebook and Instagram ads and Shopify and the importance of your mailing list marketing and all that. And I could say, oh shit, this works. Do you know what I mean? You can reach people without those gatekeepers. Yeah. And they will buy your records directly from you, and you can run a fucking label from your garage or whatever at your house. And I think it's a really exciting time to be DIY. Do you know what I mean? Because there's so much you can do now. Like, it's great all the things we're facilitated with now because of the internet. So cool. So just to add to that last question, what does your business setup look like? In that, like, are you able to pay yourselves a regular monthly wage from the band yet, or is everything that you're making getting reinvested back into the touring and marketing?
So, you talk.
So we only just recently started like paying ourselves for shows and for travels and stuff. At the beginning, everything was just being like funneled right back into Catbite. But just in the last year and a half, I guess, things have like really progressed and kind of, blown up a little bit. So it's been cool to be able to pay ourselves. It's not much, but
I think it's like the majority of it gets funneled into the band. I think we're enough to give ourselves a little something that like we can cover our rent if we're out for a long time.
Yeah,
exactly. It's like just that little bit of peace of mind. I think.
But it's cool to be able to do that and like know that it's possible.
Yeah,
and, like,
we actually just gave ourselves a raise too, which is
awesome.
this year. So,
but I just it's something that like you just think it's a kind of impossible thing to do, and like you think you're gonna be on tour and then you got to go home and work your job, and like it makes it seem like it's gonna be possible to have it as like a sustainable career.
Yeah, definitely. I think the first time we were able to pay ourselves, I remember just feeling like a overwhelming sense of like validation. Like, fuck yeah, this is working. This is actually a business now, and it's paying my rent. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
But we're very much the same. There's so many parallels. I think it's such a there's so many parallels on our journeys. But it's the same. Like the lion's share of what we make goes straight back into marketing and growth or whatever. And then we pay ourselves like a humble wage that helps our living costs, our rent and food or whatever. I think that's the way to do it if you want to compete with bands on bigger labels and stuff, because they've got the pot, haven't they? Do you know what I mean? And the big tour support budgets and that.
Right.
We don't. It's got to come from our own little pot. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but we have got to keep ourselves fed, and it's got to be sustainable, isn't it? So that's great to hear. So. One of the things I really love about you guys is you wear the genre of ska as a badge of honour. Well, I feel like you do anyway. And that's something that's also very important to Johnny and I in Deaf of Guitar Pop. How important do you think the support you've received from the ska community has been for Catbite?
You repeat that question.
Cool, yeah, it's fucking loud in here.
I lost it the last bit.
It's all good. So one of the things I really love about you guys is how you wear the genre of ska as a badge of honour. Yeah. That's something that's also very important to Johnny and I in Deaf Guitar Pop. How important do you think the support you've received from the ska community has been?
Well, I don't think the whole thing wouldn't have started without the ska community that we've kind of been trying to generate for a few years, being able to get us started up. But the other thing is that that's like a kind of like a ground level, but now what we're trying to do is kind of bring non-ska people into it. So we play a lot of mixed bills where we just did the tour with Jeff Rosenstock last year. Which he's kind of like ska Jason in ways too. But we're doing the Bouncing Souls thing. We're like trying to grab all these other markets and try to kind of like expand the ska thing beyond just your basic ska scene. And I feel like it's working.
Yeah, I feel like we're very accessible to a lot. Like our sound is like, because we're pulling from so many different genres, but we are a ska band. Like we've always called ourselves like a ska band, but like we're always playing with not ska bands, and we're playing with ska bands, and like it's kind of become a reoccurring thing that like people are like, oh, I don't like ska, but I like Catbite. We've even like turned it into a silly T-shirt where it's like a clown, a cat putting on clown makeup, saying, I don't like ska, but I like Catbite. It's like we are a fucking ska band, but it's cool because we're introducing a lot of people to ska, and they're like, oh, I like ska, and like people are realizing that like it's not a tacky genre. Like there's no taboo behind it. No matter what you like, thought 10 years ago, 5 years ago. But yeah, I don't know. It's I don't know where I was going with that. But
I think jet lag's kicking in.
I think it's like somebody who's been through a lot of the darker times in ska where it wasn't cool. Like now, like I mean, I'm always, I'll always be a ska musician. I'll always be a ska fan. I always want to go to a ska show. I always want to play a ska show. And the fact that now, like, I don't know if it was as much over here, but definitely in the States for a while, it was like, it was laughed at. It wasn't taken seriously. Mm-hmm. And the fact that it is now is even more doubling down of like, no, we are a ska band. We've been affiliated with this music when it wasn't popular and wasn't cool. And, we were outright looked down upon if you were a part of, it was a bad word. Well, what kind of music you play? Ska. Ew.
Yeah.
Cool. Go do that. And now, I think one of the huge things that's both with Bad Time, both with the scene, both, I think internationally, definitely in the States, is that sort of stigma is lessening. And as what we try to be, both the label, both us as an individual band, when we book shows, is to make them all ages. And what we're seeing is the return on that is a lot of young kids who are like going to shows, they don't ever remember that it wasn't cool. They're just like,
never knew.
This is just a new genre of music that sounds really interesting. Where did this come from? And then you start the whole process. This is where it came from. This is the evolution.
Yeah.
So once you get that sort of cycle going, it kind of just feeds itself. Play all of these shows. It's not just for dorks. And they're going to go tell their friends about it and bring them to the next show.
Absolutely.
And we're like seeing a lot of people on these tours where we get like young kids or older people like, this is my first ska show. You're the first ska band I ever listened to. This is my first show.
This is my first show.
Yeah, like that's just happening over and over and over again, and it's so fucking cool.
I think also like kids are kind of just cooler these days. Like they're not
as bothered about being part of like one tribe.
Yeah, it's not like a niche thing that you have to like. They can like what they want.
Like that. That culture seems to have died out now, doesn't it? Yeah.
And like going to shows, like I remember going, like, being a young kid, like particularly like, in the States, most bar shows you have to be over 21. So like now we're playing all ages shows. I remember doing this myself, of like going to a show before the doors open and just waiting because you're so stoked to go in.
Yeah.
And that happens all the time. This whole 3 weeks that we just did with the Bad Time, every show there was a line of kids waiting to get in because they were so stoked to be there.
Yeah.
That's the return. That's like the thing. Okay, that's like another, like you were asking before, that's another one of those moments I'm like, okay, I think something's happening here.
Yeah. Would you say it's predominantly like under 30s at the gigs, or is it a real like mix?
It's all over the place, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Like we just had our biggest headline show back in November. It was like, a couple hundred people were there, and the crowd was just, because like we're the only ska band in Philly. Like there's a couple that like play very rarely, but we're the only like constant ska band that's like really doing anything. But like it was just so cool to see our crowd. There's like bunch of young kids, they play us on the indie radio station there, XPN, which is like, it's like a
shout out WXPN.
Yeah,
it's a college funded station,
but it's like a very big radio station. They play us on it all the time. So there's a lot of old hippies that listen to it, a bunch of like every demographic listens to this radio station, and they play us all the time. So we have a lot of people from that. It's just like coming out to our shows. You have like 70-year-old hippies. You have like 12-year-olds. You have the street punks. You have the ska, like the very small ska scene in Philly coming out, and they're just like all at our show.
And like parents bringing their kids also.
Yeah, and they're bringing their kids. They're bringing their parents.
Yeah.
So it's like, that was like such a cool show to just like hundreds of people, just like the most eclectic crew you've seen.
Yeah, it's literally like,
And that's what a lot of these shows are being like.
if you were like to like poll the audience, you're gonna see parents with their little 5 and 6 year old kids all the way to up to senior citizens. It's just,
Yeah.
and
they're all dancing and having fun and singing along. It's
Brilliant.
it's cool.
Yeah, it's hot in those rooms because everyone's moving around so much.
Pumped for tonight. Yeah, I mean, over here, like, certainly, like, all the subcultures have like merged as one now. Do you know what I mean? Like in the 80s, you had the casuals, punks, mods, skins, and it was very tribal. But now, like, all the old guard have kind of come together and they're introducing their kids to it. And, you know, the fashion's mixed as well. Do you know what I mean? They'll have like a Sergio Cicchini zip up, which is like a casual thing. But then like a pair of Doc Martens or whatever in a bucket habit. It looks cool. You know what I mean? They're just merging it all and like,
that's kind of our aesthetic. A little bit of everything.
I think the people, you know, the young adopters are very much, they're not seeing it as one thing and one tribe. It's cool. All right, excellent. So I've got one more question I want to ask you guys before we conclude, and that's, what are both the short and long-term goals for the band?
The short term is like we're just touring our asses off right now, and we're writing the next record. Long term goals is like, this is our career. We want this to be our career. I think we're all very much on the same page. Like, this is all we all have ever wanted to do, is play music in a band and like make it.
Yeah, I want to. My goal is to die on stage.
I love that.
I want to sing my last note and then just pass out.
Hopefully not like soon. Like,
can you wait a few decades?
A long time from now. Like, after we've been around for a while.
I think also a longer term goal is for us to be able to do something like Mike is doing, where we're able to use our platform, build it, and then use it to bring other bands up with us.
Yeah,
sure.
Like, we shouldn't just be the only people.
That's
doing
definitely
this.
like a very short term goal as well. It's just, and we've seen it just in the past 2 years. It's just like this scene that's just growing, because there's no way we can thrive if the scene doesn't thrive, and we've seen that like black and white right in front of our eyes. Like, as we're uplifting our fellow friends and bands, we're getting bigger and they're getting bigger and the scene is getting bigger and more people are showing up to not just like Catbite shows or Bad Time Records shows, but all these ska adjacent shows. And the scene is just growing, and it's like that's the big goal.
It doesn't need to be a competition.
No, my I think my short term and long term goals are almost the same. It's just sustainability. You know, I want to be doing this right now, and I want to keep doing this many years from now. And you know, I feel like somebody asked us once, like, "Oh, are you trying to be famous, or what are you like?" Like, if you think about bands that have been around, you know, my ideal thing is like playing a room that's anywhere between like, you know, 500, 750 to like 1,500 to like, if you can just do that consistently, that's aces for me. That's sustainability. I want to keep doing this.
Yeah, awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much for being guests on the podcast. I appreciate you taking the time out. I know you've got a hectic touring schedule, and it's going to be a mad couple of weeks or so for you in the UK. But massive fan of the band. If you've not checked Catbite out yet, please go and give them a listen. Their latest album's called Nice One, which is my favourite saying in the world. So I love that more for that. I hope we can gig together at some
please.
point.
Yes, let's do it.
Right?
World tour.
Thank you. Nice one. Cheers.
Nice one. Thank you for having us. Seriously.
Cheers.
Nice one.
Thanks, Britt.
You know where we got the name, right?
I'll leave off.
It's our producer was from Birmingham. Yeah,
I used to say nice one.
Yeah, so
all he's gonna say from us.
No,
fanboy.
Davey Warsop. He used to be in the Beat Union.
Okay.
So he was our producer for that record, and just all the fucking time, nice one, and we hated it. So we loved it. By the end, we loved it. But at the beginning, while we were like trying to track the record, just nice one, nice one, but do it again, nice one, do it again. I'm like, fuck. We're on the plane home from recording, and we're like, we need to name the record Nice One.
Amazing.
And you can hear him at the very end of the record. Nice one.
Oh,
Just right in a little bit.
Well, Catbite, nice one. Oi oi people, Silky here, and you're listening to the Lifer Musician Podcast. A podcast exploring the minds of creatives who've dedicated their lives to pursuing a career in music. The Life of Musician podcast is brought to you by Hookins Management, my artist services company that empowers our fellow DIY musicians to grow a monetised fan base without a record label. We offer a range of services such as online marketing, artist mentorship, release campaign management, videography, photography, graphic and website design, plus tons more useful services that are built to cater for independent musicians on small, self-funded budgets. Helping musicians market and monetize their art form is our passion. So if you're an artist that needs help taking your career to the next level, please feel free to reach out and get in touch via hookinsmanagement.com, where you can book a video call with me for some free advice on your project.